Welcome to the podcast. Nathan Newberry here, your host. I have another Nathan Green here on our podcast listening in. He's going to share his story a lot about what he's been able to do, but he's an amazing guy. He's a, award-winning CEO, founder. He has a book out that we're going to be talking about later today. He's also exited multiple companies. He's on the Inc. 5,000, 8-figure business. We're going to be able to get some insights from him, but he's also a Christian too, and man of faith. It's also really cool to have that alignment. Nate, thanks for being on the podcast. Guys, before we start into everything, I want everybody that's listening to know that down below in the description, there is a free gift. For everybody that's wanting to dive in to learn how to grow online, there's a really good resource that I've created with a full workshop of how to build a brand, how to build a team, how to leverage and be able to make a business online. So go check that out. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Nate, I love your name. Thanks for being on the podcast, man. I want to dive in here just to hear your take on this. One of these questions I asked everybody right out the gate here is, what is high performance? What does that look like to you? Because I know you're all about high performance with what you do, but talk to us a little bit about what that means to you.
Well, man, I tell you what, it was an honor to just see your name come across. I'm like, man, another Nathan. Now we get to bring some real party to the mix. Now we get to go after it today. And so I appreciate you having me. High performance, everybody has their own definition of high performance. And for me, my high performance comes in a day-by-day comparison tool. And that I dive into that in my book about how do you compare yourself to the prior day of yourself. And so I live by this constant method of bettering myself and always trying to see what that next level I can create day in and day out. And for me, that has pushed me beyond levels of any type of external motivation. Intrinsically, man, I'm a bull in a china shop, and I'm going to constantly grow and develop my life one step better every single day. And when you start putting that consistency in place of always bettering yourself, the type of rewards that you can get on the backside are rather incredible.
I agree, man. I agree. Tell the audience a little bit more about who you are, what you do, how you serve people, because I want to make sure you're able to communicate that better than my little intro.
Man, well, I appreciate that. Through my story, and there's a lot of people always look at the glory reel, and even though I have a decent resume that God has blessed me with, I think the most important thing is the difficulties that I've encountered and what I've had to overcome, and I think that's really where I was talking to one of my coaching clients just today, and I feel like God has really blessed me with a lot of funny and difficult situations, everywhere from heart failure at 23 years old. I was paralyzed from the waist down for a few months, diving through a really tough divorce where there's a lot of child abuse and things like that involved, and just one thing after another throughout my life, and it's been this capabilities to relate. And I think in the process of what I do with coaching and consulting and really helping people build and scale businesses and really build and scale their life, if you're not relatable, then what good are you? And so it's like going to a therapist, and you're talking to a therapist, and you're talking to them about all your difficulties and hardships, and you're like, man, what do you know? You're 25. You've never dealt with anything. And it's like how they're going textbook, because they can't go with true life circumstances and overcoming the obstacles and the hardships and being shoved in the worst of dungeons and coming back out of them and thriving on the other side. And that's, Nathan, my hope is to take all of life circumstances, the valleys, the hardships, and then in turn use the hilltops as a way to get people's attention so that you can really walk them through those valleys and those hardships so that they can find their hilltops on the other side.
I think there's a mix of definition between knowledge and wisdom, right? Knowledge is you get it by experience because you've gone through those things. And then wisdom is also getting wisdom from someone else that has gone through it so you don't have to go through it. And I think that's what's really cool about your mentorship, that you're due, is because you're helping people navigate those rough waters, either if they're in it in the trenches where you can pull them out of that, a lot quicker, or that they can dodge it altogether. Talk about right now a little bit about like what you do. How do you serve people right now with your coaching company, just so people get some context? And then I want to ask you a little bit more about your origin story, because you were a police officer and other things too. I want to get some clarity from your story too.
Yeah, no, of course. Right now, I really focus on diving and help people with three key elements. And the first pillar of all of it is to help people break free. We all live in this life of a constant story, and you hear people talking about their story, and people are like, "Oh yeah, that's our difficulties, our hardships, and everything else. Maybe things we overcome, maybe things that we're still in." I think the hard part that most people miss is through our lives, through our childhood, through our difficulties, some trauma, some not trauma, just difficulties. We all have what I call cracked lenses. Cracked lenses is kind of that way that we see ourselves. We either see ourselves with a convoluted lens, one that's cracked, and I've never met somebody who's like, man, I got a perfect vision of myself. Well, maybe we need to look at all the cracks there. But we take these cracked lenses into every single circumstance that we go into, our opportunities, our future, our career, our family, our relationships. And I think that's the biggest thing. Is my entire passion starts with that pillar of helping people break free. They break free from all these cracked lenses and the way that they see themselves, to really be able to see themselves for who they really are built to become. And through that, then the second pillar is helping them break through to the realization of really what they can chase after. And then the third pillar is break out by taking daily actions to move in the right direction with all this new knowledge. And so whether it's an individual, whether it's teams, whether it is, an entire group of entrepreneurs, we work with them to help them really walk through the process of really connecting these major dots to be able to find the fast progression and their best performance on the other side.
Dude, that the awareness of who you are is so, so important, because most of the time people don't know who they are, their identity, where they're made, why they're here. And I think that's a really big pivot, to be able to know what to take action on, because people take action on the wrong things and then they are just spin out and they're depressed because they don't have that clarity. And so I appreciate you doing that, because that's so, so important for people. But bring us back to these challenges that you've had to go through to really kind of craft this for yourself, because you got a wild story here. I mean, especially the paralyzing thing. That's pretty wild. Talk to us about that. I mean, did you always know you
Yeah.
were, driven, to success? I mean, this is unique.
I've always kind of went to the beat of my own drum. Undiagnosed ADHD for the majority of my life. Definitely left for some childhood challenges, and then with an older brother that was pretty relentless, with some brutal beatings, verbally, physically, the whole spread. I was always the smaller, younger one, and he was always the bigger, stronger one, and he made that known day in and day out. And so the challenges that you go through from childhood, and then law enforcement was great. I loved being a cop. Served on the SWAT team and walked through and did a lot of incredible things that leaves some scar tissue in among itself. And then I was actually paralyzed from a car accident, and I was T-boned in the driver's door, and that put me down pretty hard for a few months. And then on the backside of that, once I did have the feeling in my legs back, then I had to go through a physical, and through that physical process is when they found out I had an issue between my brain and my heart communication, and so that led to a form of heart failure, and just a constant physical battle for the next 5 to 10 years. At first, the doctors weren't really sure what all was going on, and they thought it was a degenerative issue, and they were assuming that it was going to be about a 10-year process before my demise. 6 months later, they realized that they had made some mistakes in their diagnoses, and that they realized that it was an issue in my spine. There was basically a twist in my spine where it was blocking the communication between my brain and my heart, and so that was really the issue. And so, but when you're told at 23 years old that you have 10 years to live,
Right.
that unlocks a different beast inside of you that makes it where your relentlessness, you either are going to crumble and fail, or you're going to rise and you're going to thrive, one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they came back and said, hey, Mr. Green, we're sorry, misdiagnosis, there's something about hearing those words that you can't take back. And I think that kind of triggered a different beast inside of me that that put me in a different mode for quite a few years now. And in
Whoa.
case you're wondering, I didn't die at 33. I'm 41 now, so I'm solid. In case you were wondering, I'm not
You
gone.
beat those odds in the other
I
diagnosis.
beat them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. When the heart doctors told me that, I didn't take it very well. I actually told them I'm going to come back in 10 years and one day and punch you all in the face. This is actually what I told them, but I didn't do that.
But man, and then so this drive all of a sudden of just like beating the odds. Yeah. And then you built some businesses alongside some of this stuff. Like what drove you to that sort of extremes and success there too?
It's one of those things when you think about a 10-year window and kind of like getting shooken up and woken up in those moments, and you think about how serious each day is. And if I only had 10 years left to live, then I need to make a lot in that process. I need to make sure that I took care of my family, make sure that I did everything I could. And spending time with family is great. That's awesome. And I did a lot of that. I always had a really good balance with, or I call it more boundaries of here's work time and here's personal time. But in there, I just decided that, or I knew that I was built for something different. And so going down this path was saying, hey, listen, I was willing to fight against the odds. I was willing to go up the hill the wrong way, and I was okay with maybe going through a process of even accepting some failure along the journey. I just never wanted to accept, I guess, the norm. And I think that's how I've always been, is like, I want to go and I want to find my best version of me. And so whether it's heart failure and trying to overcome that, whether it's business or career, it's is trying to push beyond. And I think that was a very hard decision for me to make, to start my first business, because my dad was always, you got to find the security, you got to find the job with the pension, you got to have that, paycheck. And that was kind of more his philosophy. And I had to figure out how to break free from that and those mentalities to go after becoming the best version of me. And a lot of times that's when we're talking about breaking free. We all have these preconceived notions, these cracked lenses, and they hold us back in so many different ways. And so I really had to figure out who I was going to be in my life. And that was a really defining moment of taking those steps back and really figuring out who is Nate Green and who is Nate Green going to become. And that's what I had to set a trajectory in place. And once you set that, you have to show up every day and you can't look back. You can't start questioning and you can't start, worrying about, oh man. And you know what, Nathan, like there was times, especially when I had a short sale my first home, when I launched my first business, I was like, man, my dad was right. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have started a business. But then I had to stick to my plan. Yeah, I was struggling, but the struggle doesn't mean you stop. The struggle means you just need to have more grit and you got to be more consistent and you got to focus more. And that's where walking through those processes and showing up better and day in and day out, that's when I felt like God blessed that next level. And I always tell people, you got to put in your 100% before you can expect God to show up with the God power. Because you can't just sit on your couch and say, God bless me with $1 million, or God bless me with a good retirement. God, no. We got to walk through the process. We got to show our efforts. I mean, just read the Bible. It talks about action. Look at the miracles. There's steps. There's faith steps that have to be taken. And that's where I feel like each one of us, we're called to take faith steps. And some of that is maybe quitting a job and taking a faith step. Maybe that is putting yourself out there with some discomfort. Maybe that's writing a book. I mean, that was the most uncomfortable step I decided to take because I'd never even written an article before that. And so these steps of faith that we have to take, God's going to bless them as long as you're listening to him. And everything that you see in my resume, whatever you said earlier on, whatever's on my website, I give all that to God because the God power was there. He kept me consistent. And that's the biggest thing that we got to do is be consistent, and God's going to show up.
And I think that's hard for people, being consistent. It's like they have an ideas of, things with, health, wealth, and relationships or whatever. And that consistency isn't there. There's either a character that's flawed in some way, or it doesn't have that grit and grind of doing whatever it takes just because you set it out and you've disciplined, yourself to do it. Like, talk about why people fail in that and why it's important for that to happen.
So there's an equation because I'm a little bit of a nerd. Just to kind of throw that out there, a little bit of a nerd. I spend a lot of time in the financial markets, so equations and numbers is the way my brain works. So there's three key pieces, and I think when people make moves and make decisions, they're missing one of the three before they can really take the action. What you're talking about, that if they don't have the three pieces, they're missing something. And so the first one is you have to have the fuel. What is driving you? What is your why? And it has to go beyond it. And sometimes you even find those deep inside the basement. The basement is the place where a lot of your hurts and your traumas and all that kind of stuff is sitting. And sometimes you have to go down there. You got to get down to the feels. Some of us dudes aren't the best at it, but you got to go down there and get that fuel, because that fuel is what's going to keep you going. The second piece is you have to know the core of who you are. Like, and I'm not talking about, oh yeah, I know me. No, I'm talking about really going through a discovery process, in a process of finding clarity, removing the cracked lenses, really understanding who you are and figuring out what is the best version of you. Then the third piece is your lighthouse. What is it you're really chasing after? And are you limiting what your lighthouse looks like? If you're starting to limit that lighthouse, then the pathway is going to look different. And so you really got to get clarity on what your lighthouse looks like. With those three pieces, then the key is focused action. That's your multiplier. And so when you have all those in play, man, you become unstoppable. It gets ridiculous.
I think so many times we've seen people be successful, but because they don't know these things, they feel lost or they self-sabotage pretty quickly because of that. And I wanted you to talk about your journey through this, because it's not just like a 30-minute sit down session and you outline this. It's like there's some times where it takes a process of really defining who you are a little bit more, defining what you want. It's like that Notebook scene, like with the guy saying, "What do you want?" It's like sometimes people are just like clueless what they actually want, or they have this untangible view in life. Like, I remember one of my mentors asking, like, in a crowd, and he asked this one young guy, like, "What do you want?" He's like, "I want to be a billionaire." Well, let's chunk down actually what that looks like. He's like, "Well, tangibly, what you really want is, not as much money as you think it is for a billion to actually fulfill the life that you want." And so it's like, talk about your journey through this process of defining this clarity for yourself too, because, you walking through it for yourself is really important, let alone the clients that you get to serve to help them identify these things.
100%. And there's different phases of your life that you have to sit in. And and when you're looking at the different phases, like right now, I consider that I'm in more of a legacy phase, because I've already made my money. I don't have to work; I get to work, and so now everything I do has to be for a greater purpose than just providing for my family or trying to make sure that I achieve, retirement income. And so I think of it as like, that saying in Princess Bride, when they're trying to cross that bridge, there's somebody there's like, state your name and state your purpose. like that's kind of what you have to really have, that reflective moment. And it's like right now, the season that you're in, it's okay, who am I really? And what is the purpose during this season of life? And and then how does it look in the bigger scheme, all the way to like a deathbed goal? And
Yeah.
I know that in our lives, sometimes it's hard to see through the storm, even, a year down the line, much less 10 years, much less 50 years. But as far as you can cast that vision, the easier it's going to see the different phases on the journey. And that's what really helped me, is even back when I was a cop, I was still unsettled. I didn't know exactly why I was unsettled. My dad always told me, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And I thought was always really good wisdom. So, I was a cop, but I was like, okay, what else could I do if this doesn't work out for a long time? not knowing I was going to have all these medical problems. And so I started discovering myself. I mean, I was taking every career test, cognitive test, personality test, you name it. I was on an adventure of getting to know me.
Mhm.
And so that's that core piece we're talking about. Is most of the time people spend all this time researching, school, whatever their degrees in, whatever technical trade, whatever the case may be, even how to podcast. They spend all this time researching all these things. But how much time have you spent researching you? And so that's when I was a cop. And when I was a cop, I was like, okay, if I can't do this, then I'm going to do what? And that what drove me a little crazy for probably about 2 years. And that's where in that process, I put together this entire plan of how I could build a business and really build a scaling business that goes beyond me, because I was trying to set a longer trajectory, not just a job replacement, but what could I do to make more money? And so in that process, I was really discovering who I was, what kind of industry I could go in, what I could become. And so I started going to school for business and accounting. Why? Because that's what I had figured out. It's like, hey, wait a second, I'm really good at the nerd stuff. And so that's what I set out on that trajectory, thinking it was going to be more of like 20 years down the line after I retired from being a cop, not realizing it was only going to be, a few years. Excuse me. But in that process, that's really what we have to figure out is the core of who we are. And most of the time, nobody really takes the time to figure that out, to really set that right trajectory, to really understand their why, the driving forces, the lighthouse. And only once you start putting these pieces together can you really walk through the different phases. But once you do, once you lock in, then it's more of like, wait a second, that 4:30 alarm hurts a lot less because you know why you're getting up at 4:30. You
Yeah.
know the plan, you know the process. And that's really where coaching is important, is because the coaching side of the coin, we all should have coaches. It's absolutely vital because coaches bring the fast track. They bring the fast track of knowledge, just like with what you do, helping people understand how to bring consistent leads in. Like that's absolutely vital because you're the coach that can fast track the process instead of people going all the way around here and all the failures and difficulties. Wait a second. We got Nate Dogg number 2. He can come in and just show you this quick path right here, And that's the important part is, yeah, you can beat around the bush, but let's get the person that's going to keep you from making all the mistakes and failing over and over again, getting discouraged and maybe even giving up. Let's get the right track. Let's make this happen.
Love it, man. I want to ask you this question here. Oftentimes, people don't know who they are, and then they get into relationships, and that becomes a little challenging later on too, because you have your identity that maybe you don't even know who you are, and then let alone then you're marrying someone that they're not clear on that. There could be this crazy aspect of things from relationships, right? And I know for me, I'm the same journey with you. And if taking personality tests, and if people haven't done that yet, those are always great. I think I've taken all of them because it kind of helps you kind of sort through. Okay, now I like this preference or this style. This is my goals. This is my ambitions. Even alignment of career paths too, because sometimes people don't even know if they're on the right career trajectory of like, will I even like it? Like you're doing with a cop. Like sometimes you have that ingrained justice, part of us, but then we're like, I don't know if that's actually what I want to do. Right. And so people, go to college and they, get in, debt up to their eyeballs. And so they think, okay, because I've invested all this time and energy, I have to do that. And then they have loathing the rest of their life. And then they get into a relationship with people because they never define that. Talk about some of the challenges that you've had to sort through with people with relationships with that identity, because that is probably one of the big challenges people have to overcome as well.
Yeah, a lot of times people really chase down what they're trying to fix in themselves in their partner. And I find that there's so many things, and whether you're consciously or subconsciously doing it, we're all looking to be loved and to be accepted. And sometimes if that is your driving force, if you are trying to be loved and accepted, then you're putting less bar and parameters behind the who.
Mm.
And so give you an example. This is a lot of a great lesson that I learned is I went through a 10-year marriage. It didn't work out. Some child abuse and issues. Had to exit that one. But when I did go back to dating, I learned a lot in the difficulties from that first process. And so I actually created an algorithm of how I was going to go back to dating, going with understanding who I was and making sure that I had somebody and I met somebody that was in line with what was actually going to work best with me. It does make it more difficult in the dating process, for multiple reasons. To give you an example, there's this one woman that I met, just a great person, but as we got through a few dates, some flags I saw, I went back to my algorithm I created, and it was like the answer is no. But I ignored my algorithm, and I had a 5-date rule. So if I made it past the fifth date, I was in trouble. And so on the fifth date with this person, some of those flags came up again. And I could just see the fact that if I continued down that path, we were going to end up in some crazy cycles. And so I could foresee it and I could walk through that process. But it's only because I knew me and I knew what I needed. Everywhere from love language, communication styles, personality traits, being really aware made it where then I could go into a relationship with the right person. So it's not just about the spark. Now, obviously, spark's important. So it means you might have to do a lot more dating to find somebody that meets the requirements and you have a spark with, but the algorithm worked. I met my now wife, Ashley, and man, I tell you what, talk about sparks and talk about it all works. The communication, even the communication during arguments, everywhere through, the physical touch, all the love languages, personality traits. It's like Beavis and Butthead, man. It just works. And it's great. And so when you're talking about all these things, all these needs, you know, you get into relationships so many times at different phases in your life. And even looking back to my life, when I met my ex, I met her during a season when I had just had to retire from law enforcement. I lost a lot of my identity in the moment. She was a single mom and I could show up in a different way. It gave me purpose in that moment. And I look back, and retrospect is always incredible. But when you're looking back, if I was ever in my normal place in life, my normal mentality, I would have never said yes to her. And so
Mm.
that's really where the devil can use the cracks, the hard times, and he can just sit there and chisel at them and break them open, where it can completely derail sometimes even the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But you have to show up even stronger. If you are in those moments of derailment, that's when the best you has to show up. Because just because the devil meant for it to harm you, you can still show up in a different way and turn it out to make it incredible. And that's the important part for all of us is we can make mistakes, but we can still come back from them. And that doesn't mean you exit the marriage, because there's so many times I felt like exiting that marriage and I didn't. And even I had biblical grounds to exit the marriage, but I didn't feel the peace of God. And so you have to go through the process. And sometimes we're called in those seasons, and they're not easy seasons, man. These things are tough seasons. But going back to your original question, these personality traits, if we don't really know us and are not self-aware even in the moment of how we're feeling and how that can create a domino effect, then it can really lead us completely astray and find ourselves in relationships that we never should have been in.
I want to ask you about like the business that you have right now, just to kind of ask you and shift gears toward tactics. Um, how are you getting more and more clients? Like, are you leveraging a lot of AI? Like, are you said you're speaking a lot. You just got a book. Talk to us about the way that you have found the way to ramp up and get clients, just so our listeners can get some advice from you from that.
100%. So, like I was talking to you offline before, is all my businesses have always been a people first, money will come mentality. And sometimes that's tough, especially if somebody's sitting here like, man, Nate, I'm just trying to pay the bills. Well, the problem is desperation is a deal killer. That's the number one issue. Everybody's got to remember. It's like you go into a sales call, you go into a new relationship desperate, you're never going to land them. And if you do, it's not going to be the right client for you, and something's going to go wrong there. So desperation has to go off the table. So you have to fix that first problem of getting your mindset right. You got to go in with more of an impact relationship. And so when you're talking about that, naturally I'm more of a network kind of guy. When some people are like, hey, listen, I'm using this process or that's great. I use the people process. I build relationships and then I talk to the people about what I'm trying to do. If I'm trying to find the right coaching client, if I'm trying to find the next speaking arrangement, if I'm trying to find somebody to be a part about my next project, whatever the case may be, I talk to people about what I'm doing. I'm excited and passionate about what I'm doing. And so naturally what happens is that leads to new coaching clients, that leads to new keynote opportunities, that leads to new network. And then you have to show up in a dedicated fashion to work that network. It's not the easy process, but you have to make sure that you have the right tools. I mean, just like you're talking about, you have to have lead funnels, you have to have all the stuff for your network. When you're talking about the people business, like the way that I build business, you still have to have funnels, you still have to have process, you still have to have all of that, the stair steps of, hey, listen, we're going to get in somebody here and we're going to move them here. Hey, listen, it's all the same. It's the same tools. It's just more a matter of how I get to people's a little bit different. And naturally, there's always great ways like podcasts, writing books, writing articles. There's so many ways that you can get yourself more well known. And I think that's for me is more a matter of how I'm known. I want to make sure that people know that I'm here to impact first. And in that process, if I'm the right fit for you, then I'm glad to be a part of the journey with you. But if I'm not the right guy, that's fine. I'm going to get you to the right guy. And I probably hand off about 30% of potential clients because I know exactly where my skill sets are, exactly who I'm looking to help. And if somebody's wanting help in a different way, I'm not going to morph to help them. I'm going to stick to exactly what I do best. And if they need something a little bit different, I'm going to get them in touch with the right person. And that's, I think, the biggest thing, Nathan, in my opinion, is network, people, relationships, and through that, not being afraid to making sure that we're asking for referrals, we're telling people about what we're doing, and making sure that it becomes clear about what we're looking for on the backside.
I think that's a big thing because I think most of the time people, they skip that. They don't put the people first. It's more about themselves than the client itself. I think that's a big deal. Talk to us about like your ambition to get on stages and write a book. Like what has that opened doors for you by just simply having those things available?
So writing a book, I'll talk specifically about that first. I mean, writing a book is nothing but another lead source. A lot of times people are like, "Oh, I want to write a book so I can make money." Like, get into writing a book knowing you're going to lose money. Like
Right.
you're going to lose money writing a book, and it's just a lead source, and so it's just another lead magnet. It just happened to be that people are paying for that lead magnet, and so a lot of times people are given like free downloads, free this, free that, and so you got to treat a book like you would treat a lead magnet. And so inside my book, there's a QR code. The QR code leads you to some free videos. The free videos is going to have a link to have another free or low ticket. And so on and so on. You have your entire escalation. And so through the process, like I want to give away a lot of resources. Why? Because it's all about helping people have tactical steps in their life. I mean, the book Suck Less, Do Better, if you read it, it's not about telling you you suck. It's time to do better. No, Suck Less, Do Better is a daily, I'm going to show up today better than I did yesterday. And so in there, it's going to give you an entire roadmap. And so the roadmap doesn't end with the end of the book. That's just the start. So then you help people thereafter. And so for me, the book, the purpose of it was to give people a nice, clear line of sight of a roadmap of different holdbacks and difficulties. Here, do this, don't do that, watch out for this. And then here's the entire step. And so the same way that you would help somebody build a lead magnet, that's the way I look at a book. It's the same exact way. Now, the book luckily opens doors for network. And that's where some of the greatest people that I've met have been through the network that, whether it's the publisher or other authors that have reached out, great people like you with podcasts. Like there's just so many doors that open because you walk through the process and you put yourself out there in that kind of environment. It's funny, like even I'll have like radio stations call me and they'll be like, "Hey, Nate," or they'll send an email say, "Hey, Nate, can we have you on our show because your title caught our attention." Like, of course, like that's awesome, like and that's where I put the edgy title is because it pops a little bit, and so those are the things. It's just like what opportunities you're looking for, and it all has to be in line with your lighthouse, and that's where the keynotes I was talking to another coaching client about their keynotes they're trying to create, and I was telling them you really have to figure out who's your target audience, and if you have, let's say, 1,000 people in the room, you got to realize that out of the 1,000 people, you probably only have about 20 to 30 of your specific people that you're trying to impact and change their lives, and you got to cut out the noise of the other people. Yeah, you might be able to impact them some, but the people that you're really there to try to walk them through the entire journey to get them to cross over to take specific actions on the other side, you got to be there for that one or for that 20 or 30 that are really going to be ready. And I challenge them to name that person, like create a name for them. And then that way they're looking for that one Miranda in the room that they can really chase down and have the impact, cut out the noise about all the distractions and not worry about all the concepts and theories. But that Miranda is going to be a life changer. You're going to literally have the ability to really be the catalyst, and then that might lead to coaching. That might lead to the next steps, and so on and so on. And that's where it's great. And for me, I like to say yes a lot. I like to say yes to keynotes. I like to say yes to talking with people, and I mean even locally, there's some private schools that I go talk to free of charge because I'm passionate about juniors and seniors in high school really having a better understanding of who they are. So I mean, I'll go talk to any private school in the area. Why? Because that's the passion project. I can have my coaching clients and my keynotes that I'm paid for. That way I can fulfill these free things, and it's awesome.
Love it, man. How much of AI do you use? I'm just curious in your business that you're doing right now, how much of that are you leveraging?
I love AI. I love AI as a research tool. I love it to even help with outlining. And I was actually telling somebody that sometimes, like, I'm writing a new book. And so, like, I'll create like all the different subsections and my outlines. And then I'll ask ChatGPT to give me some different formats on even just the titles. As simple as that is like, hey, listen, like, this is Nate language, but, give me 10 different options on every subtitle inside that chapter on what that could look like. And so then it gets you thinking outside the box. And so I like to use AI more as kind of getting Nate outside of stuck Nate. And that's something that I use a lot on our side. We use it, man, in development. There's a platform called Gamma that we use it for PDF creations all the time. I love that. We'll take all of our outlines, and inside there, you can actually take. We've written entire documents and throw it in Gamma and tell it not to get anything from outside sources, not to change anything, just to put it in different formats. And you can create some killer documents there. So we use a lot of tech. I'm probably not thinking of like hundreds of them that we use, but I mean, as simple as Fathom, which is a note taker tool inside of Zoom calls, man, like
Right.
that's every day of the week. I mean, I have an entire nerd list of different AI tools that we integrate, but it's like it's so integrated in the daily life that it's like you forget the name of all of them because you use them all the time.
Hmm. Talk about your media team. What's that look like?
Man, we have a great media team. I've got a team. We're actually in the process of reformatting all of my social media for the last about 30 days. So we're going to be coming up with a new launch, and so we have an entire media team having to do with that. The different program there. We've got Bobby Bones, who he's our super nerd. Like, he's the guy that's like, I can't get this platform to do this. Bobby, can you help? And he literally goes through and he helps us get things to do what we need them to do, or finds the tech side that really helps integrate. I think having the right tech nerds is probably one of the greatest things that you can do, because if you don't, then you're always doing the same things the way that you know how. And so the same way all my other businesses, we had research teams, is the same way now you have to have people doing research on how can we be doing this more efficiently and more effectively. The same way you've got to be always looking for new coaches and new services that can fast track your process, because you think you're saving money by doing it yourself or having your team do it. That's not always the best way to do it. And so for me, I'm all about efficiency. That's how I've been able to scale teams. That's how I've been able to build businesses. And that's what has made me wealthy, is because of being able to use that forward progressive movements. And so whether it's AI, whether it's, being on top of all the research and the development and constantly being on top of it. So media teams, tech teams, super nerd teams, man, I'm all about that.
Yeah, it's needed. I think so many times people try to do it by themselves and they ended up realizing this online brand I'm creating is taking up so much of their time. And I'm a big advocate of like leverage. You got to build the systems, build the right team in place to be able to help you execute. And then when you are able to buy back your time, you're able to like sit back and be able to focus on the creative bandwidth for so much more. But I'm going to put the links down below, but where can people find you and connect with you further, man?
Yeah, man, it's successwithnategreen.com is the website. And then on Instagram, it's at I am Nate Green. That's the best places to find me, harass me, and not in any bad ways, in good ways though, and glad to help out. There's also some free programs on my website, and so that's something that people can jump in there. It's called Creating the Unstoppable You. It gives them some great resources and some other programs on my website as well.
Love it. I'll put that down below so everybody can connect. Thanks so much for being on the show, Nate. Hopefully a lot of our listeners got a lot of insights of like how to really define who they are, what the direction they need to go, because that's so, so important in every direction that people need to take. And so appreciate being on. Everybody, thank you for listening and tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.